Not going to make it tonight, so I guess I have to introduce myself. Let's go ahead and pray, and we'll just jump right in. Father, thanks for tonight, an opportunity for us to get together. Thank you for your love for us and just for this church. Pray you continue to guide and direct us, and it's in your Son's name we pray. Amen. All right, let's do the quiz. Let's try to do it without looking, and one person per answer here. All right, what's the first one? Can you guys see back there? Probably should try out higher. Position, right. What's the next one? Good. And the third one? Good. And then the fourth one? Good. And then the last one? Yes, good job. Now, did anybody cheat?
Yes.
I told you not to. You guys don't follow directions very well, do you?
No, we don't.
All right, without looking, what's position about?
Right.
That's right. Good job. Yeah, it's the guy with the nameplate on his desk, right? He just has a title, rights. Permission's about what? Good. Relationships. And production's about what? Results, yes. People development? Good. And then the last one? Good. Good job. Okay, which one takes the longest? Yes, this one takes the longest. Good. This is why people don't want to be leaders, because they don't want to. Oh, boy. That was a test you guys passed. That's right. This is why people don't want to be leaders, because the nameplate and the desk sounds cool, right? And the title sounds cool, but this takes a lot of time. What happens if I skip this one and just go right to here?
You don't get any results.
Right. Yes, you pull the foundation out and it all falls down. We're trying to flip the church over this way, so yeah. Thanks for helping us, Dennis. It reminds me of my wedding. It was like the whole town showed up for when my wife was. They even trimmed the trees. She was that big of a deal there, and then she married me, and then it went downhill. But anyway, it was like the church. It was like everybody was here, and it was my side. It was like 2 people over there, so it's kind of wild. But anyway, sorry to bring that up. So yeah, if we skip this, it's like pulling this block out. Everything falls down, and we've seen churches and all kinds of things, and businesses and companies and rock bands, whatever. They crumble because the relational element wasn't encouraged, wasn't focused on. You always have to work with that one. Good. Let's see. And remember my illustration, a couple illustrations I used to emphasize why it's important to how this works. One is, I haven't done it for a while, but if you're the greeter, right, and the new person comes in and it's like, oh, let me find our pastor or our leader or our elder or whatever. You run and get them, and if it's just they don't know you, you don't know them, nobody knows each other, you're starting here, right? And you have to build the relationships and work it this way. But if it's your friend, neighbor, coworker, you've been praying for them, encouraging them, building a relationship with them, and then they come, you can take them over to the person with the title, right? And automatically you lift this person to this level because they're borrowing your influence, right? And this is how this works together really well. The other example I've been sharing with you is the whole idea about if we tend to make announcements from the stage or the pulpit, whatever it is, And people are like, well, I don't like babies, you know. They have all these reasons not to do whatever because they aren't interested in that. But if I build a relationship with them and I say, hey, can you come help me out? I work in the nursery at my church and I'm shorthanded. I'd really use your help. And you kind of look them in the eye with the puppy dog thing. It's hard to say no because you're friends, right? And so you can get them to come and get involved because you've built a relationship with them. And then if you do that, and they like working in the nursery after all, even though they don't like kids or they didn't think they did, or they find another area of the church to be involved in, then you can actually reproduce yourself by having them do the same thing. Find somebody to connect with, build a relationship with them, and then invite them to be a part of something, right? So we don't just want to get people plugged into the slots. We want to build relationships with people and then invite them to be a part of things. And that works a lot better. And then we're actually reproducing ourselves. Instead of having one person in the nursery, on our nursery team or whatever team it is, we have 2 now, and then 3, 4, so forth. And what happens if people decided not to have babies anymore around the world? This is the last day ever. What would happen? Yes, that's true of groups, including churches, right? If we don't reproduce ourselves, then we won't be around. So it's vitally important. Whose responsibility is it to reproduce the church? What was that?
The church.
Only one of my ears worked, so. Everyone, yes, both good answers. It's all of our, right, because, yeah, it's that multiplication effect, right? Finding a way to, and, I'll let you in on a little secret. I don't know how to do any of this stuff. I just pray and ask God to do it. And for whatever reason, I stumble into things. And, how do you find church planners that want to start a church? That's not easy. I just pray and I stumble onto one, right? So that's really the secret, right? We ask God and we try, right? And that's how it always works for anybody. So good, reproduction. And then this is the idea of branding. People like what we do for our organization or our church or whatever. And they might not be interested in God, the church, or any of that stuff, but they like us, right? Because of the relationships, because they see what we do in the community and for the community, and that's kind of the idea here. Any questions about the 5 levels of leadership? Okay, good. So yeah, just try to keep thinking about that, and when you go to work, wherever you do your day-to-day business, try to connect with people and think about what level am I at with this person, right? And you could be the king of the world, right? And you go to the gas station to buy gas, and you're a customer, right? So keep that in mind, too. Good. We're in.
I saw this quote the other day, Mike. It would go for the personhood. The secret to success is being the person who other people want to see succeed.
Yep. Absolutely. That's good. Yeah, and it's counterintuitive because the way we've kind of been trained or the way we've kind of thought about it is, if I open my heart up and share what I know and help other people, well, they'll figure out they don't need me anymore, right? If I work myself out of a job. But it's actually the other way around. If you are empowering people, training people, and doing everything, they still might fire you, but they're foolish because then you'll be a better worker at a better company, right? You're invaluable if you can get along with people and empower people and get them on board and grow things. So absolutely. So it's a counterintuitive thing, but it actually works. And if we try to help set other people up to succeed, it's amazing how that helps us and the group around us too. So good. That's a good one. So we're in problem solving tonight. And I remember, let's see, what page are we on?
75.
Page 75. There we go. I remember I was in the Boy Scouts, not very long. I was I think it was second class or something like that. So it was tenderfoot and then second class. So I didn't get very far as badges and stuff. But I was a much better Cub Scout and Weeblo. But anyway, I got interested in soccer, so I wanted to play soccer instead. But we went on 2 campouts. The first one was so hot, and there were so many mosquitoes that you either had to decide if you wanted to sweat to death or get eaten alive. So literally, most of us just wrapped ourselves up in the inside of our sleeping bags in the middle of July in Kansas, and we sweat to death because the bugs were eating us. So that was no fun. The other one, it rained literally the whole time. It rained, and I know how to start a fire in the rain now because you have to split logs open, but it's not fun. So I don't know why I learned it. I don't want to be outside when it rains every day anymore. So, but anyway. But one of the things that happened was the real hot day. we were out, and we had these World War I Army surplus tents, which are just basically tarps. They don't have floors in them or anything. They're just a tarp, right? And so my friend and I set up I think we had cots, so we were off the ground a little bit, but we had these tents, right? And we got them set up, and we're laying in our cots, and this rattlesnake comes just right down the middle of our tent, like, he owned the place. And of course, we, being these cool Boy Scouts, we jump up and scream, like little girls. Forgive the reference there, but we yelled, "Snake!" and we just run out of the tent yelling, And so people, they see us yelling "snake," running out of the camp, and they follow us, or they see the snake and they follow us, right? So one of the two reasons there, so here's this group of Boy Scouts, and we're running away from the camp, and this rattlesnake's following us. And this one guy, he was kind of weird, but he heard snake, and he stuck his head up like this and looked around and saw us all running away from the snake. And he had this Crocodile Dundee knife, which will date me, but his big old machete thing. He just comes running at the snake, I mean, he doesn't miss a beat. It's like Jack Bauer on 24, right? Just wham, grabs that snake, pulls his knife out, cuts his head off, just like that. And I mean, we were just like, wow. He's like, "Man, this will look great on my hat or my boots or whatever." The guy was just. Now, we had a problem, right? And we were running away from our problem. And he solved it, right? So we love this guy, right? And it reminds me of what he says on page 75 when he talks about most people don't like problems, weary of them quickly, and will do almost anything to get away from them. That is so true, right? And he says, "This climate makes others place the reins of leadership into your hands if you are willing and able to tackle their problems or train them to solve them. Your problem-solving skills will always be needed because people always have problems." So true. Every church has problems. The one you came from will have them. The one you're headed into will have them. And the key difference is kind of how we perceive them or our attitude toward them. So it's important that we learn how to handle changes positively without causing fear or chaos. You can't reject that something's a problem. I have a friend that he preached at a church, and then after he was done, the elder, the chairman of the elders, was going to take him out to lunch. So he's following the elder around the church as the elder locks up all the doors and stuff because they're the only two left. And so he says, sort of, "My friend, what do we need to do to, make this church grow?" And my friend's not shy, he goes, "Well, what are you willing to change?" And the guy just stopped and looked at him, and he finished locking the main door, and he walked out, got in his car, and drove off. And my friend's just watching him drive away. And the guy obviously thought, we don't need to change anything, right? But yet he wanted the church to grow. And that's typically, how we do that. We don't want to know things are a problem, but we can't deny that we have problems. Churches have dysfunctions just like families do. There's always someone in a family who escalates everything. It's like the only way they feel like they can contribute is some form of drama. The same thing happens in the church. Dysfunction within a church happens when things that are not really important are made important by small people so that they can feel larger than they are. We have to identify those people, keep them in check, or ask them to leave after trying to work with them. If they won't humble themselves, you have to ask them to leave because it gets us off mission, right? If it's always about some drama, something, it gets us off mission. So we have to try to help them, but otherwise help them move down the road if they'll do that. Let's look at Titus, or if they won't do that. Titus chapter 1, if you have your Bible with you. Chapter 1, verse 5. And you're not going to believe this, but did you know that churches existed before elders did? It's a shock. I didn't know that. Growing up in church, I just thought elders existed before God did, but, that was me. Titus chapter 1, verse 5. Someone's got that. Go ahead and read it.
The reason I left you in Crete was that you might straighten out what was left unfinished and appoint elders in every town as I directed you.
All right. The word literally means set in order. But yeah, that happens first, right? Straighten out or set in order is really the original idea. And then after that, you appoint elders. So before you had elders, before you had churches, you had a guy with a vision, right? So, and this guy's named Titus, and Paul's sending him out. And there are some people that Paul has brought to Christ, and he sends Titus to go out and say, hey, set things in order, then appoint elders. So there's not really a church there. There's just these few converts to Christianity that are trying to figure out how to follow Jesus, because Paul's brought him to Christ, and then he's had to move on, right? So Titus goes, and he sets things in order, and I would equate that to what we'll get into in our vision chapter is vision, values, and target. It's supposed to be an S. That made it worse. So vision, values, and target. This, you need to set, it's like any kind of thing, like Jesus said, I'm the cornerstone and the capstone, right? If you're going to build something, you got to set it up correctly, right? So that everything it'll hold the weight and it'll go straight, right? That's the idea. So you're setting it in order, you're getting these converts together, you're pointing the church in the right direction as far as its vision, values, and target. And then after that, you appoint elders. And so the idea here is to protect. Protect what? This. So you got a guy with a vision that sets it the right direction, and then the elders protect that. Because what ends up happening, especially in a new church, right? But this works in existing churches too. And remember those two S's we talked about? That sigmoid curve? And then it goes down. And then you have to do this again. So it doesn't really matter how old you are. You want to get this new S going again. Whether you're a new church, whether you've been around the block a few times and you need to reset this or get this pointed back the way it needs to go. Vision, values, and target. Well, again, we'll talk more about what that is. But so I would say in our tribe, Restoration Movement, right, we tend to say churches need to be elder-led. That's not biblical. It just isn't. They need to be elder-protected. They need to be vision-led. And then I would say, practically speaking, that happens through the staff. And this is the biblical precedent of the elder that, is focusing on this stuff, right? The preaching and teaching, pointing it the right way. Let's free him up so he doesn't have to work at Prudential or wherever else, Wells Fargo, and I think there's other jobs in the Des Moines area. I'm just kidding, right? He doesn't have to work at one of those jobs. He focuses on this, and then we'll let him do the nuts and bolts of leading it, and then we'll protect him, and we'll protect the vision. So it's really vision-led through the staff, not elder-led. And I'll kind of point out why that's not a good idea down the road anyway. And it's not even in the Bible. We assume a lot in the Bible. We assume that the decision-making board makes all the decisions. You don't see that in the Bible. In fact, we don't really have a lot in the Bible of how it really worked necessarily. But that's why this is important that you have this dynamic going on. And you see how the church started in Titus, or how the pattern of how it worked with Titus chapter 1. And we'll get into a little bit more about that. The two things needed to effectively solve problems are the right attitude and the right action plan. I don't know if you saw that in the chapter. That's kind of key on how to work with that. We all have a tendency, all of our lives, to want to get rid of problems and responsibilities. I like the lonely man quote there. He said, he was asked, what's life's heaviest burden? He replied, having nothing to carry. My dad, I love my dad, but he couldn't enjoy life because there were too many problems. So he was just always bothered about things because he was in problem-fixing mode all the time. Very rarely he would come out of problem-fixing mode, and we'd actually enjoy being around him. But then he'd realize, wait a second, there's something I got to fix, and he'd get pulled back into that, and life was just this constant fixing problems all the time. We need to be able to learn how to enjoy life while also knowing there's problems and also being able to stay on top of those and fix those too. I don't know if it was yeah, here it is. I love this quote if you're underlining stuff. But, this must be in a different place. But he says, bury a person in the snows of Valley Forge and you'll have a George Washington. Raise him in abject poverty and you'll have Abraham Lincoln. I don't know if it's this chapter or not, but I like what it said. That the amazing thing isn't that Abraham Lincoln was born in a log cabin. It's that he got out of a log cabin. I think that's pretty cool, right? And you have two examples of, and I might be getting ahead of myself, but it's pretty good stuff, so I'm going to share it. You have the example of Abraham Lincoln that was very humble beginnings, right? Log cabin, no shoes, that kind of thing. but he became this great leader of the United States. We needed him, right? He knew how to lead. The other great leader was Winston Churchill, and the guy was like totally wealthy, right? I mean, he was born into wealth. And neither one of them had any choice as to where they came from, right? But they were both great leaders. Churchill he'd get on the radio and say, our greatest weapon as Britain, as English people is hope. And he'd get on the radio, and he was a great leader, and he'd encourage them while the Nazis were bombing them and stuff like that. So it doesn't matter where we start. What matters is, are we able to solve problems and move forward? I like his example about counseling. I don't know if you saw that. He'd devote 20 to 30 hours a week to counseling people when he was young and naive, and he realized that people would just find more problems. So it was really the fact that they didn't know how to solve their own problems was really the problem for people. Kind of like my dad thinking that if he could just solve all the problems, life would be great, but you're never going to be able to solve all the problems. Let's see. Under excellent leadership, a problem seldom reaches gigantic proportions because it's recognized and fixed in its early stages. Page 82 is a good little checklist of that. I want to pop over there. They sense it before they see it, intuition. They begin looking for it, asking questions, curiosity. They gather data, processing. They share their feelings and findings to a few trusted colleagues, communicating. They define the problem, writing. They check their resources, evaluating. They make a decision, leading. And seldom leaders are blindsided. They realize that the punch that knocks them out is seldom the hard one. It's the one they didn't see coming. Therefore, they're always looking for signs and indicators that will give them insight into a problem ahead and their odds of fixing it. We had a church that we were going to help start north Scott County, which is north of the Quad Cities. And we had a guy on there, and his wife came to me 2 different times complaining about some things. And so I kind of backfed that to the lead guy. It was going to be one of those campus church plants, so it wasn't just a single church plant. But anyway, so I told the guy that, hey, she came to me again. I sent her back to, follow the direction of it and everything. She kind of, it's kind of like the parents, right? When mom says no, they go to dad, can I have this, or that kind of thing. It's funny that we adults do that too. But anyway, then some other things were happening. And I kind of fed that back to him, and so then he investigated it, and the guy finally kind of confronted him and said, I don't really want to do this anymore, and he'd already agreed to doing it. But because we'd been communicating about this could become a problem, we didn't freak out and say, this isn't going to work and cause a big scene, but we were communicating and saying, hey, I'm concerned about this, keep an eye out for that. And then he did, and he saw it too, and then we were able to head it off at the pass, and we pulled out of the whole thing. It was good because it would have hurt them, it would have hurt CEM's reputation. So it's important that we're open to looking for things before they become a problem. That's why this is important too. If elders work at communicating and protecting things before they happen, that makes a big difference instead of making decisions. A lot of times we make way too many decisions and we're not able to no one's actually leading the church. The vision's not leading the church anymore. And we'll talk more about that in a little bit. Problems never stop, but people can stop problems if you produce problem solvers. Make a time commitment to people, and then never solve a problem for a person, solve it with a person. Take the individual through the sequence that has already been given for recognizing a problem, and then he recommends the book too. Then having the right attitude about it. We're going to get into attitude a little bit. Did you see the window illustration on page 84 and 85? Wasn't that interesting? Kind of one of those twists at the end of the story. The guy was just making up stuff to encourage his friend, to keep his spirits up. And the guy obviously didn't say. Yeah.
He wanted the window seat.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, you got to be careful about that. I love the illustration about the scientist. Did you get that one? That is so true about backup systems and everything. Mm-hmm. When I was younger, in fact, I got caught up into this with the 2 church. You think it takes me a while to learn things. I had to get dropped on my head twice, right? So I trusted a group of people in our movement to start a church in the Chicago area, and it was like 4.5 months. I've hit the ground running. You got to start the church immediately because the church has to have offerings so that you can be provided for, and so we're not responsible for you anymore, that kind of thing. And so, I'm like 28, so I don't know anything, right? So I'm just running like a fool. My wife's running like a fool. We're working really hard, and we gave a lot of time to that. And you realize that it's high pressure. There's no backup plans. There's only one plan, and it has to work. How ridiculous is that? How many things in life always work the way that I can't think of anything in my life, looking back, right? It's like, where were the adults in the room, right? Where are the people that hired us? Don't they know this stuff? But I don't want to go down that road too much. But anyway, same thing kind of happened in California too. So, I love this illustration because it's like the engineers are like, well, we need to have backup systems, right? And the scientists were like, well, no, we got to put all this equipment on there so we can get all this data. And they were kind of arguing about it, so they asked the astronauts what they wanted to do. And the scientists were like, well, why don't you just pick the backup systems that'll fail, and then you can make backup systems for them. They're like, well, we don't know which ones are going to fail, right? Because they know what reality is, right? They could all fail. We need backup systems for everything. So they asked the astronauts, and what did the astronauts say? Yes, wouldn't you? Yeah. You're the one in the rocket. I want all I don't care about some rock glowing in outer space or not if I don't have a backup system. And this is true too. When we think about, God wanting to use our church to accomplish his mission, we need to have lots of backup plans, right? And we need to be able to have a system that actually works in reality, which is real important. Let's see. Even having the right attitude and solid action plan, it's still important to follow a process when looking for a solution. So problem-solving process involves identifying the problem. Nehemiah was great at this. He actually named it. He said, Sanballat and Tobiah, these idiots are in my way, right? He just called it out. You guys need to watch out for these guys. They're trying to disrupt our work. He just said it, who they were. Too many times we attack the symptoms, not the cause, and we need to make sure that we go find out what the real issue is. The problem-solving process involves prioritizing the problem. Never try to solve all the problems at once. Make them line up for you one by one in a single file so you can face only one at a time. Now I'm trying to figure that out. I'm not good at this. I try to want to just solve everything at once, and it doesn't work that way. So I'm trying to learn this myself, lining them up so you can knock them out one at a time. Approach these problems not with the view of finding what you hope will be there. See, that's the key, right? We tend to want to hope that, it'll be real easy, right? I'm always hoping that it'll be real easy, or it's just something easy to fix. But to get to the truth and the realities that must be grappled with it, you may not like what you find. That's why I don't want to look sometimes, right? In that case, you are entitled to try to change it, but do not deceive yourself. What you do find may or may not be the real problem. This is huge. I'd underline this a million times in your book. You can and should make suggestions. Oh, wait a minute. That's not in the book. This is extra. So I would say you can and should make suggestions to the person with the vision, but here's the kicker. You need to support. Even the people that are, quote unquote, in charge of the church, they need to support the vision, right? Get behind the vision and let the person run with the vision, right? It blows my mind that we will hire a professional person, and pastors usually have to go. We usually, hire pastors that have undergraduate and sometimes graduate degrees in what their line of work is. And yet we'll hire them and we don't trust them to do their job. It blows me away. I mean, how many, how many professions in life do we do that, right? We don't go to the doctor's office and say, I understand you're an MD, but I don't trust you at all, right? That doesn't make any sense. We're giving the guy money and we don't listen to a word he says. So make sure you hire the right person. Going back to the vision, we need to know who we are, we need to know where we're going, so that this person will be on the same page with us, and we can trust them to run with that. And then we support them, and we communicate with that. He's given his life and his calling to that, so we need to trust him. The problem-solving process involves defining the problem in a single sentence. What is the problem? Asking the right questions. Don't speculate. We need to try to get to the real part of it. So the wrong question will always get you what kind of answer? Right. Yeah. But the right question will get you closer to the right answer, right? The right question. So it's a process of trying to ask the right questions. The wrong question that most people ask in churches are, when they're asking for help, they say, well, how do you do this? How do you get people to volunteer to do this? How do you get people to give money to this? How is always the wrong question. The right question is always why, right? Why would somebody come to this church? Why would somebody get involved in this church? Why would somebody give money to support this church? That kind of a thing. And if we ask why to the target group, people that are in the target, they will help us come up with the hows. If I know why a person may or may not come, then. And one of the things we're learning about, we have a target in fact, I met with him today. Ricky started the church in Glenwood. His target is young families and typically white-collar ones. He's meeting in a Can Redemption Center. Now, it's a nice Can Redemption Center. It doesn't smell like beer anymore. It looks really cool inside, but guess what? It's a small town, and everybody knows what? If you're going to identify where it is, it's the old Can Redemption Center, right? So, if his target was blue-collar workers that probably worked at the Can Redemption Center, that place is like the Taj Mahal. I mean, it's awesome. Now, it's too small anyway, but he's got some high-end white-collar people that he has in his church, and they get kingdom stuff. They get, that it's just a building and all that, but they have friends that aren't Christians yet. And to tell your friend, hey, come to my new church, and they're like, well, where do you meet? Well, we meet in the old Can Redemption Center. You mean that place that those kind of people throw their beer cans at? Yeah, that place, So I'm trying to get him to think about, okay, now you got the church started. You were really good at doing it for low overhead, low cost. I mean, he's got a great place to start. But I said, now you have to start casting vision. You need to say, we're going to go out here and buy this piece of land. We need to become self-supporting. And by the way, we have these missions, right, that we're going to support. And you need to come up with a big number, and you need to go and start selling it to your white-collar, affluent people so that they'll see that, okay, we're not going to be in this Can Redemption Center forever, right? So again, that's why thinking through why people would or would not go is an important thing. Talk to the right people, so ask why. They'll give you really good data to figure out the how. I remember working with a church in Iowa. Again, Iowa's a small town, so I have to be careful what I say. And this church was really known for, I think they had spit up and chewed out about about 6 pastors in the last 3 years or something. I mean, it was just getting kind of crazy. And so I don't do this now for the sake of time, but at the end of this chapter, I actually do let's practice this, running it through the problem-solving process, right? So, okay, what's some problems that we want to try to run through their course? Well, I heard we run through pastors, we got a reputation for that. I'm like, okay, we wrote it down, right? And, of course, we had other ones. I said, which one do you want to do? They're like, well, we want to do that one. And, of course, the elders are back there like, oh, no, right? But the people want to talk about that. So we started going through this, right? Ask the right questions, talk to the right people. I said, okay, who would the right people be to talk about this? Got real quiet. And some brave soul said, well, I guess we could talk to all those former pastors that aren't here anymore. I'm like, that's great. I said, you don't have to agree with them, but they will give you invaluable information that if you think this is a problem that we're just going through ministers way too it's not right, they'll give you some information that maybe help you with that process. So you need to ask the right kinds, talk to the right people when you're trying to solve the problem. Get the hard facts. Facts are stubborn things. Once you have the facts, what you need to do becomes clear. Get concrete examples, not just what people conclude. Listen to what is not being said and gather the important data. That's so important. We had a pastor in the state that he was kind of really sold on this whole, if you build it, they will come, kind of like Field of Dreams thing. He must have saw the movie, right? So he has a small church, and they were kind of outgrowing it. And his solution was, we need to build a bigger building, right? We need to do an addition. And we kept telling him, I don't think that's the right solution. And he just kept saying, it took him about a year to finally see reality, because we kept saying, why is that the only solution to this problem? And he just wouldn't hear it for a while. And so we sat down and we did the math with him, right? And so he realized, and we showed him that, look, if you built on to your building, right, it was going to cause your offerings to have to triple to pay for it, right? Are your people ready? Can you do that? And he's like, I guess not. So we're like, why is this the only solution? There's other solutions out there. And so once he realized that wasn't a wise thing to do, he started coming up with some better ideas. One was that we cut his stage back, because, it was a cracker box of a building. It was probably about, that was the whole front, right? And they had it downstairs. So we cut his stage back a little bit. He went to 2 services. Wow, that doubled the space, like that. And he did something else with his kids thing. But his church doubled in size the next year. So again, a lot of times we're convinced that we know the right answer, but without asking the right questions, right? Get the hard facts first before we jump in there. Stuff I wish I'd have known when I was younger. Get involved in the process. Most problems are not what they seem. Don't just ask the right questions and gather hard facts. Get involved by doing the actual jobs of the people concerned and see what problems arise. Problems should be solved at the lowest level possible. That's why, again, at this level, you don't want to be making a lot of decisions. That's why a decision-making board should only be utilized. Make one decision a year, maybe two if you have to. Decisions that affect every single person in the church. Otherwise, you want to let people at the lowest possible level make the decision. Empower them to make the decision in their area because they'll know how to solve problems better than we will at a higher level. Problem-solving process involves selecting the right people to help you. Remember the worm diagram? That's what I call it. From last week? Instead of the change, diffusion, something academic. So we have remember that? And we have the innovators, we have the early adopters, we have the adopters, we have the late adopters, and my favorite one, the what? The laggards, yes. The reason why most of our churches in the United States, not just our churches, but any churches and any kind, most of our churches in the United States are dying. The church is dying in two countries, the United States and Europe. It's because of this reason. They're ran by decision-making boards, and they're made up of these kinds of people. They won't change anything. And so basically, you just die. And there's no ability to change it. That's why you don't want a decision-making board making all decisions in your church, because it won't be around. This is the group of people you want to help you make change. You want to get them out, let them do a ministry, and let them run with it. Let them make mistakes. Let them figure out how to bring people to Christ. So you don't want this group in a decision-making group leading change or trying to solve a problem. Find people that are entrepreneurial and visionaries. 92 is a good list. The little bullet points down there at the bottom, if you can see that, where it says, before inviting people to attend a problem-solving meeting, ask these questions. Is it a real problem? Is it urgent? Is it the true nature of the problem known? Is it specific? If people talk about everything, they'll eventually talk about nothing, right? And then this is the best one. I just circle this, underline it, dance around it, whatever you do to remember stuff. Has the group most competent to discuss the problem been invited, and is each participant concerned about solving this issue? That is huge. That is huge. So, in other words, you don't want everyone looking into solving every problem. Let's look at 1 Thessalonians 4, 11, and 12. So go ahead and read it out loud if you got it. 1 Thessalonians 4, 11, and 12. Great, thank you. I love this verse because it reminds us what? That we need to make it our ambition. I love the turn of phrase, right? Be real ambitious about what? Minding your own business. Isn't that great? Too many cooks spoil what? Yeah, right? You got too many cooks in the kitchen. Get out, right? I'm trying to make dinner, right? Whatever. We get too many decision makers all together. You need one. One decision maker leading a team. And I'll show you in our last week how you can do a real good, cool communication thing that I stole from one of my friends. That's really amazing. But anyway, you don't want too many people doing things. You want people on a problem-solving team, like we got a problem to solve, so let's get these people together. These are the only two things you want. Are they the most competent? Do they know how to fix this, right? And also, are they interested in this, right? A decision-making board that makes all the decisions in the organization of the church. I mean, it'd be like if I went to McDonald's and said, hey, can I have some fries and a soda? Well, just a second. We got to call the owners. You'd leave. What do you mean you got to call the owners? I want a soda and some fries. What's the deal, right? Well, I don't make decisions here. I don't know if I can, They hire a guy and say, sell this stuff, right? And here's how you sell it. Here's the manual. That kind of thing, right? Don't steal, don't give the store away while I'm gone, kind of thing, right? So a decision-making board that makes all the decision organization has automatically violated these two things. We're assuming they know everything there is to know about everything, which is definitely not true. I've never seen a board that knew everything about everything. And that they're interested in everything. Have you ever been to a board meeting where half the people are like, I have a friend, he was at some nonprofit thing, he's texting me, half my kingdom for an Advil, right? He's like, oh, these do-getters are killing me, right? In other words, he was not interested at all in the thing they were talking about for an hour, right? It was fun, and this guy's hilarious. But anyway.
Just put a U in there and we'd remember that, say dumb.
Oh, that's a good idea. The problem is, well, I'm not going there. That was an unsolicited response. I'm going to put the fifth on there. But anyway, like for instance, I'm the last person you'd want to invite to a homeless ministry, right, to be on the board. Because I'd be like, get a job. Tell them to get a job, like every 5 minutes. Why are we talking about this? Now, that sounds bad, but I know God loves them. I know Jesus died for them. And there's real ministry. There are people that are really good at that, and they're fired up about it, right? I'm fired up about starting churches. That's me, right? I'm like, okay, let's talk about that, right? But I'll be like, tell him to get a job. I just would be like the worst guy. I'd be like interrupting. They'd be like, get him out of here, right? He's causing problems, and that kind of thing. So we're not all interested in the same thing, and that's okay. One of my good friends, he had some of the worst, god-awful ushers, greeters in the universe, right? They were terrible, terrible people. And no one in his church was competent enough to train him. So he found the best customer service people he could where he lived, and it happened to be a Starbucks. So this guy that always served him Starbucks coffee, he said, hey, how'd you like to make $50? And there's some kid, 19 years old, and he's like, what do you mean? He's like, I give you $50, you come to my church, you spill all the trade secrets of Starbucks on customer service to my ushers and greeters, and you can walk away with $50. He's like, when do I come? So this kid's not even a Christian. He comes, he trains his ushers and greeters on how to do customer service, look people in the eye, all the stuff that he was trained to do when you come in to get coffee, right? And he's got some of the best greeters in the whole country now, right? It wasn't even a Christian that trained him, right? Now, he didn't say, hey, well, you want to teach Sunday school or anything dumb like that, but he found the most competent people to solve his problem, right? And it was a good investment. His church is massive now, so he's made that $50 over and over again. Most interested, I already kind of told you about the homeless thing. So that's why this is important when we think about problem solving, and why we want to decentralize decision making to the people that are working within the ministry or the team. Okay, problem solving process involves collecting problem causes. List all the causes of the problem by asking what caused the problem and how the problem can be avoided in the future. Problem-solving process involves collecting problem-solving solutions. And you need to pick more than one because, again, backup plans, right? I had to switch gears and get another lender because when we moved to Iowa, we were going to buy a house. And they wanted 2 months proof of income. I'm like, I haven't started yet. And the guy's like, well, it's the law. I'm thinking, that's the dumbest law I've ever heard. I know people move from one town to another, and they buy houses. That can't be true, right? So I got another guy for a backup guy, and guess what? Oh, that's ridiculous. We can do that, right? He's like, Mike's got money. We'll take Mike's money. We'll figure it out. Just have your board write us a letter. I can do that. It worked, right? So you need to have backup plans, right? Collect solutions, kind of a thing. Problem-solving process involves prioritizing the selected best solutions, right? So you go through, you pick one, you weigh them out, and then implementing the best solution and evaluating it. Let others test it out, punch holes in it. If they point out real operative problems you can observe, then you need to make adjustments and then ask evaluative questions. So page 93, 94, really good stuff for resource for you. Problem-solving process involves setting up principles or policies to keep problems from recurring. So the idea is that once you've gone through this process, you've solved the problem, you can figure out, you can have a policy that just automatically works so that you don't have to keep going through the whole process again. So I got a friend, and what he does is their policy, because their target is young men ages 19 to 39, I think. And how he got to that target was he called all the churches in the area. He found out who was going to church and who wasn't going to church. That group, no churches in the whole area. It's probably an area of about 150,000 people. No church was reaching young men ages 19 and 39. None of them. So that was his target. So that target is young, right? And so what he did with his worship band is he gave them policy, and their policy is this. If you can't hear it on the local contemporary, not the classic oldies hymn stuff, but on the contemporary Christian music station, you can't play it in our church. So that way, when the contemporary music station would get a new song, they'd play it on the radio, the band would hear it, and they'd learn it and play it. So they were doing the research and development for them. And what was cool about that, too, is when people would come to Christ and hear their music at church, they would tell them about the radio station in town so they could listen. It was like having church. New Christians are great. It's like, man, it's like I was in church all day and I'm driving around town. And you're like, yeah, that's cool about it. Now, I'm not saying that should be this church's target because I don't know that, right? But I'm just saying when you have your target, you can set up policies to reach the target that you can give your teams guidelines on that to be able to not have to go through the whole process over and over again, kind of a thing. Okay.
I love the example. There was an older established church and a couple pastors, and the older pastor said that there are at least 2 songs a Sunday that irritate me because it's so for the young people, then I'm not happy, really.
Yep. Yeah, I got it. Well, here's this, and I think I shared it on Sunday, one of the messages, that the idea was that his goal is to reach the next 2 generations, right? So when he gets close to retiring, he shouldn't be able to stand to the church that he started. The guy started it, right? And he said, I've done my job. We have some churches that in the 60s and 70s, man, they grew big. And the guy stayed there too long. And they didn't reach the next 2 generations. And so the group just got older. And what happened was, it's not pretty. And then they asked me to help. And it's usually like, when you're the pastor and they say, we're going to get a divorce, help. And it's like, okay. It's kind of like duck, it's about all you can do is try not to get hit between the two of them punching each other out. So it's important that we think about what God's called us to, right? But good example. Okay, 1 Samuel chapter 17. Let's look that up. Samuel 17, we're going to start verse 11, and we're just going to do that, starting with 11. And then we're going to do verse, okay. So who's got verse 11?
I do.
Okay, go ahead.
On hearing the Philistines' words, Saul and all the Israelites were dismayed and terrified.
All right, go ahead and read verse 16 too.
For 40 days the Philistine came forward every morning and evening and took his stand.
All right, thank you. So we've got a problem here, don't we? What's the problem's name?
Goliath.
Yes. And is this problem going to go away? Now, how many days have they dealt with it?
40.
Yeah. I mean, I tend to ignore things, but I don't know if I'd get away with ignoring it for 40 days, but who knows. That's a long time. So 40-day problem not going away. By the way, that's a big problem, right? Literally and figuratively. Verse 23 to 40. So what's happening here? Someone read that. Or not 40, I'm sorry. That's a lot. 23 to 24, that's better.
As he was talking with them, Goliath, the Philistine champion from Gath, stepped out from his lines and shouted his usual defiance. And David heard it. Whenever the Israelites saw the man, they all fled from him in great fear.
All right. So David saw it. So everyone turned away in fear. David heard the same thing as everyone else. And let's read verse 26. And 32 to 37. Someone read those.
David asked the men standing near him, "What will be done to the man who kills this Philistine and removes this disgrace from Israel? Who is this uncircumcised Philistine that you should defy the armies of the living God?"
Is that all three of them? Oh, yeah, 32 to 37.
David said to Saul, "Let no one lose heart on account of this Philistine. Your servant will go and fight him." Saul replied, "You are not able to go out against this Philistine and fight him. You are only a boy, and he has been a fighting man from his youth." But David said to Saul, "Your servant has been keeping his father's sheep. When a lion or bear came and carried off a sheep from the flock, I went after it, struck it, and rescued the sheep from its mouth. When it turned on me, I seized it by its hair, struck it, and killed it. Your servant has killed both the lion and the bear. This uncircumcised Philistine will be like one of them, because he has defied the armies of the living God. The Lord who delivered me from the paw of the lion and the paw of the bear will deliver me from the hand of this Philistine."
All right, thanks. So David had the right attitude, right? Talk about trash talk. Man, they're all afraid, which I would get that. He's like, what are you guys doing about it, right? Are you letting this guy, defile the armies of the living God, right? He had the right attitude. He said, don't let your heart be troubled about this. I'll take care of it. I killed a lion and a bear, and this Philistine will be like that, right? And he gives God the credit too, right? I mean, he did it, but God gave him the opportunity to take care of that, which is pretty cool. So he had the right attitude. That's crucial, that we have the right attitude when we face problems, even big ones that don't seem to go away. Okay, let's read verse 38 to 40. Who's got that?
Then Saul dressed David in his own tunic. He put a coat of armor on him and a bronze helmet on his head. David fastened on his sword over the tunic and tried walking around because he was not used to them. "I cannot go in these," he said to Saul, "because I am not used to them." So he took them off. Then he took his staff in his hand, chose 5 smooth stones from the stream, put them in the pouch of his shepherd's bag, and with his sling in his hand approached the Philistine.
All right. So, interesting. What is the word that he uses to tell the king, no, I don't want to use your stuff and your armor? Did you pick up on that?
I'm not used to it.
What was that? Yeah. Is the word tested in any of your versions? Okay. It's literally, it is yeah. It's literally, I haven't tested this, right? I'm not comfortable with this. Isn't that interesting? So it's not just a feeling or a mindset, right? It's also what? An action plan. So that's what this chapter is about, right? You have the right attitude, and you need to have the right action plan. And that's how this works together. We talk about faith being, stepping out in faith and all that, and I'm all for that. But it's better to step out in faith with a good action plan that includes what? Lots of backup plans. I'm all for that. I love backup plans now, right? They're my favorite.
Backup plan.
Well,
4 stones.
yeah, he tested it. Yeah, I guess that, yeah. You had 4 stones instead of 1.
But he had experience.
Yes,
Yeah.
exactly.
It's
Exactly.
interesting, David had a vision to see how the problem could be solved when nobody else had.
Mhm.
A different approach.
Mhm.
And even when he put it forward to the leaders, oh no, we're going to put all of our old armor, the old solution. The
Right.
Only possible solution.
Yep, right.
You're going to take this sword, you've got the bravery. He's
Right.
going, no,
Yep.
it won't work.
Yep, that's good. And what's cool is that, he'd been spending time with God out with the sheep, and he knew how to defend the sheep and protect them, right? And so he knew how to do that as the king later on but yeah. And I think sometimes we get too far sometimes on the whole, the faith as in, we don't have to have all the information. And then, we have too many action plans, not enough, let's step out and do something new. But then the other side is we don't need any information, right? And that's kind of what when I was kind of raised with the whole faith being, you don't need any information, that's dumb. God calls that foolishness, right? get all the information you can get. And yeah, you're going to step out in faith because you don't have all the information. And God's called you to go make disciples, right? And God's going to show up and help you do that. But it's good to have all the information you can have, not just, well, it doesn't matter. And hopefully God's taught me not to do that anymore, right? I just jump out and say, I don't need any information. I'm just going to trust God. God's like, don't put that on me. That's not me, right? You're going to make me look bad. Don't do that. Does that make sense? So let's test this. Let's test it as much as we can, and then let's also step out and trust God. Good. Because, what he did is not safe, right? He stepped out. Goliath could have, but I won't tell you this end of the story, sorry. Verse 43 to 47. Almost gave it away. Cool, thanks, Sal. So which one of this? Is this attitude or action plan?
Yes.
Good question. I'd say it's probably more attitude, and then in the rest of the chapter, if you go 48, is he's carrying it out, right? Is this one. But yeah, it does involve both of that. Don't you love that? The guy, he mocks him again. What are you, like some dog throwing sticks at me, right? And then then David's like, dude, I'm going to cut your own head off with your sword. Yeah. If the flannel graphs when I was a kid had, his head, pulled off, and David, I'd have paid attention to this story. They left that out, the sling and, He cuts the guy's head off, man. And then he carries it around and they route it's cool guy movie stuff. It's awesome, right? But yeah, what an amazing leader on solving problems, right? Good. All right, unless you have any questions about this one, let's pop over to attitude quick. All right, extra plus in leadership is attitude. I remember when we purchased a used van in, I think that was Chicago, wasn't it? No, that was California. We purchased a used van in California. We drove it off the lot, and about a couple blocks, I realized it had a flat tire. So turn around, got my family in the car, in our new, it was a Caravan, so we were cool back then. Pull in, and all the way there, it's my dad's, voices in my head talking about used car salesmen and how they're, like you got lawyers and used car salesmen and scum of the earth and all that. So I'm just all worked up that this guy, took advantage of me. I pull in, and the guy sees me come in again, so he kind of walks out there. And I let this poor guy have it. I just, all the wrath and fury of hell, right? Just let this guy have it. The guy's kind of like, the Memorex commercial. He's just kind of, and then he starts doing this, because I was not checked in. He's doing this to try to get my attention. And then he finally is like really loud. He says, I'll take care of you. I'll take care of you. And I went, oh, okay. I just was ready to let this guy have it, because I thought he ripped me off, and I needed to let him have it so he'd do what he should. He was like, I'm really sorry that happened. We'll take care of it. It won't be any charge. That shouldn't have happened. I'm really sorry. Then I'm thinking, oh man, I hope the guy doesn't know I'm a pastor. That's just, but it was probably too late. The finance guy knew I was, so. But anyway, that wasn't my finest moment. But that's attitude for you, right? We can have an attitude that we bring in, right? And we're convinced about that. I just knew the guy was not going to take care of me, and he was just, he actually did. So attitude is extremely important. You've heard Swindoll's quote, 10% of what happens to me and 90% of how I react to it. Disposition of leaders is important because it will influence the way others think and feel. Great leaders understand the right attitude will set the right atmosphere, which enables the right responses from others. A lot of good stuff in here. Our attitudes determine what we see and how we handle our feelings. These two factors greatly determine our success. Psychology 101 taught me that we see what we're prepared to see. I'd underline that. That is huge. We see what we are prepared to see. That is so, so true. The man who lost the saw thought the son was this evil guy, that he followed his son's friend around because he thought, that guy stole my saw, right? Then he finds behind his bench, remember? He's like, oh, okay. He's not a bad kid after all. I've done that, I know you have. I love the school system one. I think that was in San Francisco or Oakland they did. That's so funny, right? They pick these students at random and they say, okay, we're giving you gifted students and we're giving you troubled students. Of course, the scores went down with the troubled students and the scores went up with the gifted students. And then they told us teachers, guess what? We just randomly picked students. They weren't problems. They weren't gifted. And the teachers were like, oh, okay. Exactly. Isn't that funny? Well, we must be great teachers. Well, we got another confession, right? Well, why did they go up? And why did the other ones go down? Because they'd already made up their mind that, oh, these kids are bad kids, so why even bother? Or these kids are, so it's not working, so I got to figure out a way so that it'll work because they're gifted. You know what I mean? That is a huge thing. All right. Oh, I forgot to give my warning label about attitude. Sometimes we think attitudes are going to solve everything, so a couple of warning things about it. There's 10 chapters in the book, and if you just do the attitude one, it won't work. You can't just have a happy, good attitude about everything. You got to do all the other ones too. And I think a lot of times we think people that have positive attitudes and happy attitudes, we think that that's the only thing that's going to do things. And some people do that and nothing works, but they're oblivious to it. The other thing about positive attitudes too is that we can escape reality with them, right? You know that Winnie the Pooh, one of my favorite cartoons. You got Eeyore on one side, and who's the happy one? Tigger, right. You always got to keep pinning the tail on Eeyore. Oh, everything, after too much time with Eeyore, you're going to jump off a bridge. It's just life is terrible. I'm done, right? And there are people like that. They check out of reality and every day is terribly, terribly bad. But the opposite is true too. You can be bouncy all the time and totally check out of reality. Who needs drugs and alcohol when you've got positive attitude, right? You're just checked out of reality and you're bouncing around and so it's not an escape from reality, right? We're not saying that. And a lot of times people who have positive attitudes, we make fun of them because they're totally oblivious to what's really going on. So we're not talking about that. So this is part of the whole thing. I like Abraham Lincoln's quote, every man over 40 is responsible for his face. He didn't want the guy in his cabinet because he was a downer. Now, Abraham Lincoln was a melancholy guy. This guy was a real downer, man. I think it's funny. And then the mother-daughter one, same thing. Did you see the nasty look the salesman gave me? The daughter answered, he didn't give it to you, Mama. You had it when you came in, right? It's a brave girl. Yeah. That's why people don't like kids, right? They tell the truth, right?
And the tattoo.
Yep, that's a good one. Mm-hmm. That's a really good one. I love page 106, the 4-minute mile. This is great for vision too. Isn't that beautiful? How he talks about it was impossible. So what do? Kind of like the beginning of the book. We tend to look for exceptions. Well, let's not get too excited and let's not worry too much about being a good leader and having more influence and growing God's kingdom or whatever. Because, this happened and then this happened to me and then so, we say that, there's these exceptions to this. Instead of trying to be what? Trying to be exceptional, right? Trying to look at what can God do, right? And so they came up with all kinds of reasons why no one could break the 4-minute mile, right? But none of those were really true because once they broke it, everybody broke it. Well, I haven't, but anyway. A few decades ago, the runner who finished dead last in the New York race would have been regarded as having accomplished the impossible. Isn't that amazing? What happened? There were no great breakthroughs in training. No one discovered how to control wind. So those are all those excuses. It was human attitudes changed. Now, underline this and write this down. This is huge. You can accomplish your goals if you set them. Who says you're not tougher, smarter, better, harder working, more able than your competition? Now, this is the key. It doesn't matter if they say you can't do it. What matters, the only thing that matters is what? Yeah. No, I'm not saying you can, I can slam dunk because I want to. Obviously that's not going to happen. But we're talking about kingdom stuff God's called me to do, those kinds of things. We can do these things. But if we give up and we say we can't do it, then I'm the one that'll be holding me back more than anything else. He does have a pretty decent how to change your attitude thing. I want to actually give you a better one. And the reason is because if you look at the front of the book, you see that he dedicated it to somebody. You notice the last name? What's the last name? Yeah, it's his dad. His dad was a pretty amazing guy. His dad was a president of a college, very grown up, you know what I'm saying? Poured into his son. John Maxwell had a great parents that really poured into him, gave him a lot of confidence and stuff like that. Guess what? Not everybody gets parents like that. So if you had amazing parents that gave you a lot of confidence and you knew how to do this, you just grew up with this stuff, you know, you saw your parents do this stuff, and, you know, then that's great. Then this book, you can just take this and refine your skills. But if you're like me and your parents they didn't have that for whatever reason to give to you, then you have to kind of start in a different place. And so what I mean is that attitude is more than just, you know, thinking right. It also has to deal with healing from our past and making sure that we've been able to let God work in and through that. And that's why it's important. Now, I would still say this is the absolute best book on how leadership works. It doesn't matter if you live out in the country with only 2 people in your town, or if you've got 50 billion people in your town. These things work in every context. But it's important to think through some of this dealing through past issues to be able to get you to the place where you can hear this stuff and apply it, if that makes sense. And it's kind of like what we do with feelings. So let's look up some of these passages. Proverbs 19:22. And Proverbs 27:19. Proverbs 25. Okay, so before we launch into this, the guy that I would recommend is Dan Allender. He's written several books. I like this book and Dan Allender's books because Dan Allender's book helps you heal from past abuse, and this book helps you to kind of implement things that once you're kind of on your process of healing for that, you can really implement this and move forward with it. So it's kind of hard to move forward with this without dealing with some of the past things that you've dealt with. So I recommend them together. And he's done a lot of good books. His best book is The Healing of a Wounded Heart is kind of his, or no, is that right? Yeah, he's got a new version of that. But my favorite book of his has helped me a lot was called The Cry of the Soul by Dan Allender. Just spectacularly good about emotions and feelings. Because, you know, I grew up, you know, it was like I was raised like, you know, you're supposed to be a robot and you just didn't feel things, you know, and that's not good. So what's good about this book is he has a thing in there about feelings. And my favorite analogy is they're like messengers from the front line. So like back in the, you know, Revolutionary War days and the Civil War days, you know, you'd have messengers that would be out in the front and they would kind of figure out what was going on, and they'd either run back or get on their horse and ride back to the generals way back in the back, right? And he would tell them the news. And you heard the old saying, right? Don't shoot the messenger, right? The general would get all mad and shoot the guy, right? Now, that didn't accomplish anything, except maybe the next guy's going to lie. It's great. We're winning. Can I get you some more tea, general? Whatever, you know. So, but feelings are like that. Things are happening all around us, and our feelings are a tool. God gave us a brain, which is important, but he also gave us feelings, a heart too. And they work together. God wants them to work together. So if something's going on and I feel a certain way, it's just a messenger running from the front line saying, hey, something's going on, right? It doesn't mean you necessarily react to that feeling. We don't act on every feeling we have. That would be bad. But we need to know why. Why do I feel this way? And we need to investigate that. So that's kind of, I credit that to Dan Allender in his book, The Cry of the Soul. Anyway, let's read it. Let's look at Proverbs 19:22.
What a man desires is unfailing love, better to be poor than a liar.
All right. So, the first one is aware. So what we all long for is unfailing love, and of course in this life we don't have that. We have we step out and we get our heart crushed, right? We want this unfailing love, or we have someone that was put in charge of us to protect us and pour into us actually hurt us and abused us instead. That's why a lot of times people have problems with authority. It's not just they're bad kids or bad adults. It's that the person that was in authority over them actually hurt them. And now they don't trust any authority, right? And that's a dangerous place to be in too, because God calls us to have authority over us. So that's why it's important to work to be aware that this stuff is going on in our life. So the idea of abuse here is God wants us to be treated valuable and important and special. And guess what? People don't do that. So in some form or fashion, we've all been treated less than God would want us to be treated. And that's what this is, just being aware that that's going on. Desire broken or abuse. Let's look at Proverbs 27:19. Okay, good. So we need to be aware of what's going on. And the idea here is, how are we doing with being aware of this? Right? I look in the water, right, to see how things are doing. And how do I know how I'm doing? Well, I look in my head, right? Do I believe the right things? That you got to be baptized as an adult by immersion to be saved and go to the right church. And that ain't going to help me with this, right? I need to do what? Where do I look? Yeah, well, what's going on here, right? How do I feel about things? What's going on, right? And if the answer is, I don't know how I feel, and that's me a lot of the times, guess what? That's bad. That's not a good thing to not know how you feel. That's not good, right? So what this does is it tells us how we're doing. And so the question is, aware of feelings. And the idea, am I either one of two things? I'm either hurting or healing. And you can usually tell the two. So if I'm hurting, that means either I'm not aware of my feelings or I haven't went through this process for God to help me to begin to heal them, right? So if I'm hurting, I'm kind of bleeding all over the place. I just can never get enough people to give me enough attention and to talk to me enough, or you know what I mean? People are just wounded. They're just bleeding all the time. Or healing, it's like, yeah, this happened to me, but God's He's helping me. Yeah, I hear my third grade teacher's voice in my head every now and then, and I have to decide, am I going to listen to that, or am I going to listen? You know what I'm saying? That's healing. That's different. So it's important to kind of know which way am I going by looking in my heart and trying to check that out. A lot of Bible verses beyond Proverbs about all this stuff, but just trying to, for the sake of time, giving you an outline. So the first part of this is being aware, broken desire, abuse, and then how am I doing? Am I hurting or healing with that? Proverbs 20, verse 5.
The purposes of a person's heart are deep waters.
And then the next part of that should be another part of that.
You're right.
Oh.
But one who has insight draws them out.
Good. And I would just call that God's trusted people. The man of understanding, yeah, or person of understanding. I'd call it God's trusted people for two reasons. One, you don't want to get somebody that talks about stuff, they gossips, or the people that say things that was said in confidence. Well, how do you know that? Well, if they tell you other people's stuff, don't tell them your stuff, right? You need to find someone that won't talk to other people, right? You can trust them. But it's also, I think, this is the idea of someone that's already been there before, right? Now, if you had one of your kids killed, right, I can't help you with that. I've wanted to kill one of my kids, but that's different, right? But I have a niece, right, or a cousin. Yeah, Diana's cousin. She lost both of her kids. She knows what that's like. She's a person of understanding, right? So that happens to me. I tend to cram feelings down, step on them, act like I'm okay, right? But it's like a beach ball. It wants to keep coming up. Now, who's going to help pull that up? Not me, because that hasn't happened to me. But someone like Teresa can come alongside and say, man, that happened to me. That's not cool, right? Or whatever. And then that stuff can start coming up. And that's why the whole, how are you, I'm fine, how are you, I'm fine, doesn't work. You got to be around people that, and that's kind of the idea of the counseling world has really become what the biblical world used to be pastorally, right? We love one another. forgive one another, right? Right. That's all counseling does nowadays. We say, got to take them to a head shrink and get their head fixed. No, you need someone to tell your stories to, and you need someone to listen to your stories. That's all it is. And you can get a doctorate in it, and that would be great. But guess what? That's really all it is that. And the church needs to be good at that again, because once we do this stuff, then this stuff makes sense and we can launch forward on it. But if we don't deal with some of this stuff, it's real important. So we need to be around God's trusted people that can help you out. Now, if there was a church planting organization that dropped you on your head and didn't do what they said, I'm your guy. We can talk and cry all night about that. But you know what I mean. We all have different things that we can help unpack. So that's the next thing. So it's being aware what's going on, and then unpacking this. Just like anything else, when we moved to Iowa, if we'd have left all our stuff in boxes, my wife probably would have killed me by now. We've been here 5 years, right? But it's like, the mom of the family wants to put things away. Why? Well, because you got to know where the Band-Aids are when the kids fall down. You got to know where you know what I mean? You have to unpack things so that you can move on and do what you need to do for your life, whatever your job is, right? And my job is different than your job, but you got to have your things in order, right? Same things with your inner life, right? You got to know how you've been hurt or how you've tried to jump out. Moses, let's do it, guys. Put the gypsy in the sand, killed the guy. Let's do it. And he had to run away, right? A lot of us, we try things and they don't work, right? And so we have to go through this process so that we're ready, unpack our stuff so that we're ready to launch forward. Okay, Ephesians 2:8 and 10. Who's got that? All right. So I call this created for. We're created for or called to do, right? Now notice he didn't just say pastors with Bible college degrees, right? Everybody. You're saved, God's called you to a ministry, right? And that's part of what all this stuff's about. We want to empower people to do their ministries. So for me to connect, find out what God's created me for and called me to do through this, through the salvation, I first need to be aware of how I've been hurt or my desire has been broken, and then how I'm doing with that, and then am I unpacking this, right? Am I letting God's trusted people, the church? Now, why do we need people around us to do that? Because we'll chicken out, right? It's like having an AA meeting with one person. It doesn't work, We need God's trusted people around to say, how you doing? I've been praying for you. I care about you. I love you, man. If you need to talk, let's talk, right? We chicken out. We won't go through because it's a hard process. And we need people to stand by us so that then we can connect with God at either maybe for the first time or maybe at a deeper level, more effective level. Find out what we're called to and created for. And then, of course, we know this verse, right? I love Ephesians 3:14-21. This part is we have unlimited love. So as Christians, we have access to how high, how wide, how deep God's love loves me, right? I can spend my whole life as a Christian trying to figure out how much God loves me, and I'll never succeed. That's cool. What a new purpose and focus in my life. So God can empower me with his love and motivate me, because ministry is difficult. People bite the hand that feeds them. That is ministry. That's why people don't like to be leaders, right? But also God's power, right? He can do more than we can ask or imagine through that too. This is the next part. So I went 3 minutes over. Who's a fast prayer? Pray for us quick. Yeah, I talk fast. I've been told that. I've been told that I talk fast. Rick, you mind praying for us?
Rick.
Oh, I pointed the wrong guy. Sorry.